In this episode, Dear Martin will focus on the role of private finance in addressing climate challenges and supporting nature-based solutions with a special focus on Africa's natural capital. Dia will discuss how institutions like the DFC are mobilizing private capital to drive climate action and biodiversity conservation. And today we have two special guests. My co-host, Kelvin Massingham, Director of Risk and Resilience at FSD Africa, and Dia Martin, the Managing Director, Social Enterprise at the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Dia. Really great to have you on the Voices of Nature podcast, and we're looking forward to the conversation. We're here at New York Climate Week. How's your week been so far?
It's been very busy, but a lot of fun and just a great learning experience. So I'm so excited to be here.
Do you notice any differences in, as New York Climate Week has evolved over the years, and this week in particular?
Mm-hmm. What I've really been impressed with is the depth of conversation and the call to action. So that's one of the differences I've noticed, as well as a focus on collaboration and partnership, which is really exciting for us at the DFC.
Great. Okay, so today on this podcast, we're exploring the role of development finance institutions, DFIs, in mobilizing private finance into the nature, climate, biodiversity type of space. For our listeners that are not familiar with the term DFI, it means a government-funded institution that looks to invest in low to middle income countries to drive development objectives. So DFC is a DFI funded by the UK government, by the US government.
Yes.
Pardon me. And so, Dia, it would just be great to hear a bit about your role there and about DFC.
Yeah, sure. Happy. Yes, DFC is the DFI funded by the United States government. We have evolved over quite some time. We've been in existence for 5 years. Prior to that, the agency was OPIC. We have a very large portfolio of over 40 billion invested across multiple sectors and spaces. We go all the way from very small transactions to large transactions up to $1 billion. Wow. And we seek to have an impact in all the areas that we invest in. What I think is really exciting is we just underwent a realignment, and now we're focused on sector. And then the team that I work on in the Office of Catalytic Investments, we focus across all the sectors and looking at transformative, innovative investments for the agency and really seeking to be a first mover and very strategic in how we work with our partners globally.
Great. And do you have a specific geographic mandate?
Our geographic mandate is vast. So we have a large portfolio in Africa. I think it's about 25% of our total portfolio. We're also active across Asia, Latin America, and the Ukraine as well. So it's exciting.
Yes. And how is the DFC playing a vital role in mobilizing private capital, especially, like you said, in the markets such as Africa?
That's what we do. That's our one of our main purposes is to catalyze and mobilize private capital. So all of our support is focused on the private sector, and then we like to bring in or crowd in private capital and the investments that we make. So you'll often see us working with co-investors from the private sector or seeking to mobilize them in transactions. And in our team, we also look at blended finance transactions where we can bring together partnerships between the public and the private sector as well.
And what type of instruments have you?
So we, that's a really great question because we work across the board as far as instruments. We have a very broad and wide-ranging toolkit. So we can provide technical assistance, pre and post investment. We also are really excited with our equity program. So we're able to support direct equity investments and investments in funds. We have a large debt portfolio. That's our primary instrument. So we support debt funds, intermediaries, direct loans into companies. And then we have political risk insurance. And we're one of the largest providers of political risk insurance on the globe. So a very expansive toolkit that we're excited to leverage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think it's not all DFIs have as an expansive kind kind of instrument set that you do, as well as a broad mandate, and kind of you can do small and large ticket sizes. So that's really fantastic. Really interested to know, as you look at particular projects, and especially, we're concerned on this podcast with kind of nature-based investments, and often that has a climate resilience or adaptation impact as well. How do you assess sort of what's a high quality project from an impact perspective?
Yeah, so I think I just want to take a step back and just really acknowledge the progress we've made as we focused on climate finance. I'd say about 3 years ago, approximately 500 million of our investments, or a little bit less than 500 million, were climate focused. Today, we have close to 4 billion in investments in our portfolio that are focused on climate. I think that we're very thoughtful about how we look at that space, at the climate space. So there are two aspects of it. Specifically, first, one of the things that we have is a chief climate officer and a climate team that is very helpful in supporting a lot of our innovation related to climate. So we have a technical assistance facility, as well as support on innovative financing, and also being able to leverage their expertise as we look at different transactions. In addition to that, we measure impact across all of our transactions through our Office of Development Policy. So for every deal that we do, we look at the environmental and social concerns as well as the economic impact. This is something that's inherent in the work that we do. So I'd say that's more of a broader layer across all projects. But then as we look at individual climate projects, we look at their impact as far as adaptation, mitigation, and resilience.
I know you've been primarily climate focused, but have you also looked at kind of the nature side of things, at kind of biodiversity related projects, nature-based solutions?
Yes, we have. And we feel that nature-based solutions are integral to our work in the climate space. So I'd say one of the things that's really exciting is if you look at our portfolio, in every area you can see, or every part of our toolkit, you'll see a focus on nature-based solutions. So, for example, we have the Miro Forestry project that we've worked on in Sierra Leone and Ghana, where we were able to make an equity investment in sustainable forestry. If you look on the debt side, we have a few transactions. We have our Comico transaction in Zambia, where we're working with smallholder farmers in agro-processing, and we've been able to look at nature-based solutions there, specifically as it relates to tapping into the carbon credit market. And also very excited, yesterday we actually had a session where we announced our commitment with Barca Fund. And this is a small, a fund that's focused on SMEs across the Sahel region, where they're looking at supporting SMEs that are focused on adaptation and mitigation in the climate space. So broad-based portfolio, but definitely focused on nature-based solutions.
Okay. And part of the challenge sometimes when you look at kind of the biodiversity impact of projects is the complexity of analyzing and monitoring that over time. It happens over a long period. There's biomes that are very different from each other, and the kind of the flora and fauna impacts that you need to measure are sometimes pretty complex. Have you started to think about sort of metrics or standards for how you evaluate the biodiversity side? Yeah,
I think that's really important, is as we start to look at more projects, the technical aspects of those projects. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about our technical assistance capacity, is being able to leverage that, as well as some of our policy professionals, to look into the true details and impacts, specifically as it pertains to biodiversity. So that's a lot of the work that we do, is kind of looking at that and measuring that very closely, so we can see the true impact of our projects. But I think it's really important for us as a DFI to be at the forefront of learning. And one of the things we hope to do, specifically in the office where I sit, is by being forward-leaning and investing in these projects to build a learning practice around it. Best practices, lessons learned that we can disseminate internally, but as well as to the private sector and other DFIs. So definitely more to come.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a vital role that a DFI plays, is kind of the public good side of the lessons that you've learned, sort of making kind of almost like a living lab of the work that you've done, so that others can benefit from it in the private sector. Because I think one of the things that we really see in the nature space is that because it's complex, it's difficult to replicate. There's no kind of well-trodden paths or models that you can use, and so you really need to be sharing information, the learnings from different projects. And I think that's really exciting and kind of a vital role that you can play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we look at, when we speak to financial institutions who are part of the membership of the African Natural Capital Alliance, of course, there's an increasing focus on nature positive, an interesting definition. But essentially, how do you see the role of DFC evolving over time, even as financial institutions, as asset owners and asset managers begin to focus on nature positive?
So our role really, or how I see our role, is to build nascent markets. So I see ourselves as being an overlay, walking and working in partnership and collaborating with financial institutions to support nature positive transactions. And I think sometimes there needs to be a group or a consortium that takes that first step into building the market. And that's where I see us coming in. So in any way that we can work to provide a platform or help to leverage investment in nature positive transactions and biodiversity, nature-based solutions, we want to be in that conversation and see where we can play a role. So we really see ourselves as opening up and expanding markets and making this a real asset class for major large-scale investment globally.
And as you look at that, what's the role of partnerships? How many, when you look at the kind of work that you have done so far, what are the key partners that you've had to work with?
Okay. So at DFC, we work with almost everybody. So I think there are different types of partnerships. There's partnerships, as you were mentioning, as far as learning and building expertise and knowledge. And we see a lot of our partners in that space as other U.S. government agencies. We work a lot with USAID. We work with also different nonprofits, philanthropic organizations. There's also partnerships across the capital stack. So there we work with other banks. We can work with intermediaries and funds. And also for blended finance transactions, we can look at other philanthropic providers. It's also great to work with different consortiums and organizations that play a role in advancing the learning across the sectors and in different regions. So we'll partner with them as well. And then, of course, some of our favorite other partners are other DFIs that we work with and coming in and working together. So, I think as far as partnerships, there are so many opportunities to collaborate that's really an important part of development, because there's always areas where one may have an expertise versus another. And so if you could bring that together, you have that full suite of knowledge and the capital stack to really do impactful transactions.
Great. And can you give us just an example or two of some of those transactions that you've done where you've worked with other partners, where you've kind of crowded in the private sector, just to give our listeners a kind of flavor of some of the things you do?
Yeah. So I would go back to, as I mentioned earlier, the Barca Fund, which is a transaction that we're really excited about. That's top of mind because we recently announced our commitment. So I think it was really interesting in that transaction, not just working with the client for investment, but also working with WRI, with Bezos Earth Fund, to bring together the structure and the investment to really support underserved SMEs. I think what's also exciting about that transaction is we were able to combine our finance capacity alongside our technical assistance capacity and not only provide financial support, but also to be able to provide support to the fund post-investment that will really help to build the SMEs and help to build and expand the fund.
And can you just talk to, I know this is a nascent space, and because it's emerging as an asset class, there's a number of unknowns, a number of risks that you have to mitigate, and that's part of the role of the DFI is to take more risk and to demonstrate how it can be done. So in the example of the Barca Fund, what were the main challenges that you had to overcome?
I think some of the challenges were really understanding the business opportunity and the business case for the SMEs. What's really exciting is we were able to support an emerging fund manager, gender diverse fund manager. And I think that's very important to have in the climate conversation and the nature-based solutions conversation. How are you supporting local entrepreneurs and fund managers? So I think those were some of the things that we had to look at this being a new space for us. I also think much broader, when you look at across the board of transactions, we're seeing a lot more transactions that have the component of carbon credit, biodiversity credit in it, and kind of really understanding that market and that model and how we can assess risk in that space and be more influential in making investments to build those markets.
Okay, and just staying with that example, I mean, we're a lot of the anchor members and a lot of those that we deal with are financial institutions, are commercial investors, and really looking at it from a risk return perspective. And there's a lot of competing investments that they need to consider when weighing up alternatives. And so what was the kind of commercial offer of this fund for the private sector?
So I think it's really important to look at scalable solutions. And I think for us on the commercial side, that's what we look at. Or is this something that's scalable? Is it sustainable? And can it provide real impact along with being scalable and sustainable? So that's what we look at. We're constantly looking at, I guess, what would be defined as the commercial offer, because our goal is to bring in more private sector investment. So that's something we look at analyzing on an individual project basis, as well as for intermediaries that are working in markets. And that brings up, I think, a really good point, if I might add there. A lot of our work is with financial institutions. So some of the things that we've seen is that there's a real interest, especially in the initial stages of a new type of project or emerging sector, is looking at risk mitigation. And so we offer portfolio guarantees to provide some support for financial institutions to move out and invest in new areas, as well as the technical assistance component, which I think often isn't talked about as much, but is very important to combine with investment to mitigate risk and in some ways enhance returns for a lot of the portfolio.
So the perceived and real risk, especially for Africa, I mean, it's a big challenge for any investment. And you kind of talked about political risk insurance. Could you speak a little more? Do you have any example, especially within Africa?
Yeah. So I think that specifically with political risk insurance, we look all the way from very small projects to very large projects. Some of our debt for nature swaps that we've had colleagues work on that they could probably speak more about. But I find that it's extremely helpful when we're talking to clients, specifically given certain markets, to talk about our political risk insurance product and to couple that along with the investment product as well. So we see that as really helpful, specifically for clients that are new to certain markets, new investors to certain markets, and may have concerns about that market or building a portfolio of investments there.
I mean, we think that's vitally important, because often the countries that have the most biodiversity, that have the most ability to absorb carbon are some of the most vulnerable, some of the most politically unstable countries. And so for especially international investment to come into those countries, we really need that type of guarantees and cover that the insurance can provide. And typically specialty insurers globally are a bit wary of offering kind of, as comprehensive a cover as investors might require. So I think it's another key role that you can play. I just want to, also ask you about accessing DFC support. So, we work with a lot of project developers, and there's a huge amount of innovation and kind of new projects emerging, and obviously Africa has this abundance of natural capital, and part of our role is to help connect the projects with the supply of capital, and so both the commercial capital but also the DFIs and those that can blend. And so for our listeners who are developing a project and interested in DFI support, how do they go about it?
I think there are so many ways. So first of all, I'm glad you mentioned the word innovation and innovative, because I think that is going to be a fundamental part of the equation in investment in this space. And we really seek to be innovative and look at different structures, whether it's different, as I mentioned, partnerships, blended finance vehicles, results-based financing. So we're always thinking about ways to innovate to better serve the market. As far as reaching out to us, there is an abundant number of paths. I think one, reaching out to us directly, whether it's email, there's on our website, one can do so. We tend to send staff to a lot of conferences and events around the globe. That's also a good way. And then what I'm really excited about and what I want to plug is our team in countries in sub-Saharan Africa. We have teams in South Africa, Kenya, representative in Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. So we have individuals in market that are very active in sourcing deals and sharing those deals with us in DC. So I would say don't hesitate to reach out with us. Try any of the ways that I mentioned, and we'd be happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, dear, as a side note, DFC sounds very up there and very hard to reach. And it's good to see what you're saying, that there are in-country teams that, project developers and implementers can actually access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I mean, I think this has been a very encouraging conversation. It's exactly the type of thing that we need a lot more of, especially in Africa, as those that are kind of working in the space as African Natural Capital Alliance, where one of our main objectives is to mobilize more private finance into nature positive. It's really encouraging to hear all that the DFC is doing, your willingness to engage, your support for innovation, your flexibility in the way you structure things. And so been very enlightening, and we really look forward to exploring more transactions with you in Africa. I know there's some that with some of our members that you're already working on, and more will be announced soon. But it's really fantastic, and we are very interested in sort of continuing to collaborate and partner. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy to be a part of this conversation, and definitely interested in working together and collaborating more.
Great.
Great.